keep up to date with our latest videos, please hit the subscribe button below.
Hi there, welcome to this video from racingbetdata.com. Today we're going to be covering something that we've been asked a couple of times now from people, is how to identify a front-running horse potentially looking to lay back to lay or later back using our data. So most of the focus recently has been on our data dashboard, because that's obviously where we've just added in a significant amount of improvement. But we don't want to overlook the fact that there are two other valuable data streams on the website. That's the pre-race download and the results and odds download file. So we're going to use these today in this video to show you how we can analyze and identify quite quickly and easily potential horses for that are going to front run a race or potentially going to be held up in a race. So if you navigate to the pre-race download file page now and download today's file, you'll be presented with the data on screen here on the Combine tab. Now what we're going to use a combination of pivot table and graph in this analysis. Now this is purely a demonstration. The fields that we're going to use and the examples we're going to show, this is purely just to give you an idea of how you can use Excel and the functions within it in coordination with our data to start analyzing and identifying things quickly and easily. So you could perhaps replicate this model or something very similar, build it into your routines, and it would give you an easy daily or even race by race check to identify horses that you might want to potentially trade. Now remember, we're only looking at data here, so there are always going to be other factors that influence anything. So you've got to consider the weather and jockey performance, how the horse is looking. Anything additional to the pure data that we're showing on the screen here needs to be taken into consideration. So without further ado, let's get into the data itself. And I'm going to select Insert, and I'm going to select all the columns in the data export. Now I've got it filtered on Combined, which is all the racetracks for today. Select Pivot Table, and we're going to select the range. It's already done, so it's identified that, and we're going to pop it into a new worksheet. And there's our pivot table. Now we're going to select the date, and we're also going to select today's race. Now in the output, what I want to do is select the horse name, and then I want to select some criteria to go in this values. So looking back across the headers here, I'm looking for things that will tell me why or where a horse would or is likely to front run. Now, one of the obvious ones is the pace rating. So the higher the pace rating, the more forwardly it's anticipated that a horse would like to run. And we've also got the DOB percentage as well. So this has told us where historically a horse has halved its odds in running. So DOB is double or bust, and this is a cumulative score that we assign to each horse based on its previous performance, and that incrementally changes as it goes through its race by race. So if we look at the DOB percentage, that will indicate to us where a horse has halved in odds more often than not. So I think those are two good variables to use. Just because I'm using them doesn't mean this is the right or wrong way to do it. Again, I'm using it for demonstration purposes. There could be other factors that you want to consider. It may be that you're looking for a different approach or angle, but this method will still work using the data analysis that I'm going to do and the graphical presentation. So let's navigate back to the newly created tab, and let's add in the variables that I've talked about. So we're going to add in pace, summer pace, and we're going to add in the DOB percentage as well. And we're going to change that to a sum. Okay, so we've got all the horses listed here. We only need to look at today's racing. So I'm going to drop down and go to today. You can also do that from the filters. You can filter those out on the Combine tab if you wanted, and just leave today's horses in there if you wanted to do it that way, but this way works just as well. And then we can start looking at races in the output. So we're going to go for Cheltenham. Now another thing to consider is horses you may be looking at a race that's a maiden, a novice. There may not be much history, so you're going to have to consider that. You might want to apply additional filter in here to say that only consider horses that have run X amount of times. But again, another thing to consider when you're looking at data, if they've only run, this is the second race they've run, one race in the past, if they dobbed, they're going to be 100%. So you're going to have to consider that. Now what we need to do is put an additional bit of coding in here, because the graph we want to use, which is the scatter graph, doesn't work with pivot tables. So that's a function within Excel. You cannot scatter graph off a pivot. So we need to export this data into separate columns. I'm going to show you how to do that. What we want to do first of all is right click on the pivot table options, and take away the total. We don't need those included. So then we can simply input horse %, pace, and we can just reference the horse name. Now what we want to do, because this is dynamic, there may be more horses if we're looking at different races. Like I said, we want to build this up dynamically. We're going to put an extra layer of code in here with the if statement to say if this is different to blank, then select that cell. If it is blank, then leave it as blank. And we can drag that across, and we can drag it down to, I don't know, about the 55th row. That should cover all the races that we need to look at. You can tidy that up. You can change the format of that cell to a percentage. And there we have our first output for the first main race of the day. We need to input and convert this into a graph. So we select the data in our output that we want to see, and then we select the XY scatter, which has already presented us with some detail on a graph. Doesn't mean a lot at the moment, some fancy blue dots sprayed across the screen. Let's make this a bit bigger so we can start looking at it. Now we're going to select the axes here and format this, because there isn't a pace rating of 12. So we're going to stipulate that this is between 0 and 10. And then the axis value, so the midway point, is going to be 5. And we can close that down, and we can do similar for the DOB percentage. And we want to fix that in as a 0 to 1. So this is percentage, and then the midway point, 0.5. And that's formed our crosshair there, you can see on the graph. So you can already see that we're building up a bit of a picture here as to what horses like to do what, although at this stage it's just a blue dot on the screen. Now what we can do is apply an additional sectioning off, if you like. So let's apply a simple line. Now there's different ways to do this as well. You can color shade part of the graph, however you want to do it. Just doing a very simple line on here just to identify to us very clearly by vision where we have potential horses that are front runners and horses that are held up. So you can see from this graphic straight away, we don't really have any in this bottom section. Now what we've got here is the pace rating as the vertical and the DOB percentage as the horizontal. So to explain these boxes in a bit more detail, if you've got a horse in this box here, it means it's got a low DOB rate, but it's got a high pace rating. So what we're expecting is potentially that horse to go off fairly quickly, but towards the mid-end of the race to be not in contention, so you don't expect its odds to half. Here you've got horses that have a high pace rating and have a higher DOB percentage historically. So possibly you're looking at horses here that are going to front run and also stay in contention towards the mid-end part of the race. On the bottom left quadrant here, these are horses with a low pace rating and a low historical DOB. So you're looking at horses here that are probably not going to start too well, and they're going to fade fairly quickly. And this bottom section here, you're looking at horses with a low pace rating but a high DOB. So these are potentially ones that are going to be held up, but historically have a good DOB score. So they might stay towards the rear of the field until the latter stages of the race, and they might be produced late on. So that explains these 4 quadrants. And like I said, just because I put these lines in here, you might look from a different angle. We're just going to use this as a demonstration purpose. Now what we need to do is identify, well, what horse is this? What horse is this? There's no naming on it. So I'm going to show you how you can add these labels. So if you left click on one of these and then right click, we need to look for format data labels. And you can see we don't have that as an option yet. So if we don't have it as an option, we need to add data labels. So we left click here and then we right click again, and now we have format data labels. Now we have options here that we can choose and tick from, and the one we want is the value from cells. So we tick this and it pops up a little box asking us where the data range is. So we can select here. I'm going to select all the way down to 60, and that gives us our data labels. Now we don't really need the pace rating on there, and we can take out the leader lines if we want, and you can position this where you want. So you can put it over the top, above, below. I'm going to position it just to the left of the dot, but like I said, the choice is yours. So you can see now that this is beginning to become a little bit more meaningful in terms of we've sectioned off two parts of the chart. We have two horses that fall within our section of the chart here, and the rest fall within this middle section. Now, depending what it is you're looking for, and like I said, I've used DOB percentage and pace. You can use different variables as inputs, but we can use this to identify where we think a horse might front run or sit back, come late, whatever it is you're looking for. Now, the beauty of this is you don't have to watch the race to see how your predictions, if you like, got on. You can use our results and odds download file, which I have open here. So these races have already taken place. So I'm going to look for Man of the Mountain, Man of the, there you go, and you can find that horse. I'm going to highlight this one. So we identified this one as being a potential front runner. So high pace, we expected it to run well and dob. So we're going to scroll across now and look at the BSP for this horse. And you can see there that the horse started at 7.2. That was the BSP at the off. Now we can use the in-play odds data here to scroll across and see how the horse traded in running. So what we're expecting to see is this horse's odds decrease as the first sort of third of the race went on. If you don't see that, now if we were acting on this and the information on screen is not what you expect it to be, any decent racing trader will tell you if what you see on screen isn't what you expect, then get out. So if the horse's odds stabilized or even fluctuated and went up, then it possibly would be an opportunity to exit the trade. If you're not seeing what you expect to see, don't sit around and wait for it. But let's just have a look at the odds. So you can see here the horse started at 7.2, and it did indeed slowly decrease through dropping about 8 ticks here, down 12 ticks, and slowly did progress down towards 5.1 in running before it came back up slightly, and then again it stabilized around 5 and bounced between 5 and 6, back up to 7 slightly, and then it started bouncing around as the conclusion of the race got nearer. But you can see here that this horse probably did do as we expected it to do in running. It did drop by a few ticks as identified. Now there was another horse in the race as well that we highlighted in that top section. So here, Cool Cody. So you'd have two potential horses that you would be looking to trade here. So let's see how Cool Cody did. So again, we can do a search. You can use the filters if you wanted to just isolate that one horse. Let's have a look at the full output. We can highlight this one in a different color. So Cool Cody, his SP, he started at 4.5. Okay, so let's scroll again to the right-hand side. And again, you're looking to see similar patterns with this horse. So it started at 4.5. And these odds scrapes are taken about 2 every 3 seconds. So you can see here that the odds didn't really drop as we expected them to. So this would have been probably an example of a trade that you would look to get out of because you're not seeing what you expect. The horse's odds didn't change at all really in the first section of the race. So that would have given you an opportunity to get out of that race or out of that trade, rather, because you're not seeing what you expected to see. And as you see, actually, as the race progressed, the horse's odds drifted even further away from the SP, and then eventually up to touch the 1,000 in running. So that's 2 examples there of what I'm talking about. Let's look at another race and how we have to change the references on the daily sheet to cope with horses with races with different amount of horses. So let's look at the next race at Cheltenham. So we've looked at the 205. If we scroll down and look at the 1440, we've actually got the same amount of runners. Let's go back to the let's look at the 130. So we've got one more runner in that race. So what you need to do to identify the full data range is go to so you right click on the chart, select data, and then you can just type in the range, bring that up to 13, so you're including all the horses in there. So if I look at another race, for instance, typically that's got the same amount of runners. Here, you'd need to do the same again. Now Beverley looks like these are novices or maidens, so you haven't got much data at all on that race. Look for another one. So here, you'd need to increase this range down to row 20. So you've got the full data range and you've got the full labels of all those horses that meet that criteria. But let's get back to Cheltenham, the 1440 I think we're looking at. Then you have to scale this back down to row 12. And there you go. So you've got your horses that populate. So you've got Pull Again Green, the standout horse in this top section that we've cordoned off, if you like. So let's look at Pull Again Green and see how he did in running. So back to our results file. Pull Again Green. And if we highlight this one in gold and we scroll across, you can see that the SP for this horse was 302. And again, we're looking to see a similar pattern. So the horse started off and it stayed up around, it's sort of increased and actually drifted away from its starting price to start with, before eventually breaking through the 3 barrier and then dropping down sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 ticks in the early stages of the race. Again, it then bounced back up to around the 3 mark, so it did sort of sit around its SP, drifted out a little bit further as the race progressed before dropping back down to or below the 3, but it did continually hover around that mark, and then towards the latter stages of the race you can see the horse actually broke through the 2 barrier and went on to win that race. But the main exercise around this video was to show you a very simple graph, how we can use a pivot table, separate off the data, and then also use some visual displays to help you analyze horses and their expected performance.